welcome to today's episode of The Human Angle. Thank God it's Friday. There will be various issues affecting our economy and our nation today, from taxation to the removal of the fuel subsidy and fuel increase to commodity prices increasing. Therefore, on today's episode, we'll be discussing on macroeconomic conditions as it affects Nigerian consumers. I have with me on the show today to discuss on this my colleague, Mr. Ottoabasi Abasiekong. It's great to have you on the program. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Taiwo. It's nice to be here after a while. Thank you.
So basically, like I said, there are a lot of issues. But first, I'd like you to share with us the COVID-19 pandemic. How far has it affected the economy?
Yeah, from the global perspective, it has affected. We have a huge case in terms of the number of confirmed cases. The impact has been very huge, and people that have died, over 700,000 people. And an economy like UK, that's a G7 industrialized economy, for the first time in 10 years, experienced shrinked, and that means that it experienced its worst performance in growth and the recession. And that shows you how COVID-19 has really disrupted activities. Prior to now, Japan was the first G7 economy to experience a recession. In the US, it's been a challenge in terms of the jobs reports, and that shows you how the government in the US have been fighting hard to see how they can manage the citizens in terms of unemployment benefits from $400, currently what President Trump is doing. Down in Nigeria, our growth rates at the first quarter of 2020 was 1.87%. Inflation is still rising, 12.4%. And just today, the unemployment report published by the National Bureau of Statistics showed that we are still on a high trajectory in unemployment, 27.1%. We are facing revenue challenges because apart from the COVID-19 pandemic, we are facing crude oil price shocks and volatility. So that is also putting pressure on our foreign reserves, which is hovering around $35.6 billion. A much challenge for the central bank to manage the foreign exchange. And then when you look at the broader context, revenue is very important for government to keep things going.
Definitely.
And the tax fiscal space is being explored. On the back of that, the Economic Sustainability Plan was rolled out in June as a way of response post-COVID on how to manage the economy. And the impact of that is what we are looking at, hopefully would really stabilize things. Over 2 trillion naira stimulus being earmarked, working between the federal government and the Central Bank of Nigeria. And in that perspective, one of the major concerns for me is how the social intervention programs are scaling down to the populace, because we see figures being bandied from the Ministry of Humanitarian Disaster Management in terms of the vulnerable people that are benefiting. But data in terms of the impacts, verification is very important to really know that, yes, the vulnerable people are really feeling the impact of these interventions. And that also goes to private sector activities like CACOVID, the Coalition Against COVID-19, which had Central Bank of Nigeria driving efforts with private sector. They came together and they raised over 25 billion naira, and they said they're going to use bulk of it to address the issues of the vulnerable people. Initially, it was supposed to address healthcare systems, but now they are looking across the country to provide succor to vulnerable Nigerians. So we need to also track that and see the impacts of those. So in a nutshell, our economy for now is on a positive growth in terms of 1.87%, but second quarter 2020 will really tell if we are on that, because the major driver of our growth, the crude oil, the oil sector has been experiencing unprecedented shock. Major oil companies have posted in second quarter 2020 negative profits. I mean, negative results. I mean, these are historic results. I mean, ExxonMobil, Chevron posting negative reports in over 3 decades. So the impact of all this will stem true. But for now, it's really a challenging phase for us. And the most important thing is the transparency in all these interventions, which is meant for the vulnerable and the poor people. Because if those interventions are not scaling down, then we are facing a socio-political crisis. Because when it is not impacting them, it fuels instability for the unemployment that we are facing now.
I'd like us to discuss a bit about, you just mentioned about the crude oil, the shock we're experiencing concerning that. Would you think it's time for us to start really taking implementing programs that have been said concerning agriculture in the country?
Yes, the Economic Sustainability Plan, which is currently the agenda this government is pushing post-COVID, is looking at robust diversification of the revenue. So it's looking at agriculture at the core of it,
definitely.
looking at the solid mineral space in terms of how they can harness those potentials. And also we are looking at solar renewable energy, gaining local content to be involved there, where they can create jobs. They're also looking at mass housing projects where people can be engaged. So all these activities from the ESP is to stimulate activities in the economy, support households and local enterprises, small medium enterprises. And also in this period, the 50 billion naira rolled out by Central Bank of Nigeria through the microfinance, the NISAL Microfinance Bank. That is one area we also want to see how many SMEs have been able to access it. And you know that when you talk about MSMEs, over 80% of the MSMEs are micro businesses.
Yes.
One-man business. So
Businesses,
how are they able to access this support? Because when they access that support, it also drives economic activities. So you're right in the sense that we've been over-dependent on crude oil as a major revenue earner. But now we're seeing the government beginning to talk about it and begin to make out a plan to drive agriculture, solid minerals, and other sectors to diversify revenue. And that is going to be a long-term plan because at the short term, develop the process, and at the long term, sustain it. But again, the challenge over the years is that when crude oil price stability comes back, when things come back, we always abandon it. So that is one major area that we must address. I mean, just recently, the president launched the presidential artisanal gold mining initiative, whereby we can harness gold and also earn from it. And now in the markets, gold is becoming a value in terms of safe haven for investors. So if we can scale our mining of gold, and already we have a refinery that is been earmarked for operations. If we can really scale in that area, we can also earn, talking about solid minerals. So we need to deepen agriculture, but not just agriculture as farming, as a business, agri-business. The whole value chain is very important for investment. So we must be focused on it, and not when things get back to normal for crude oil, we divert again.
All right, but let's move on to taxation. And now we've seen some states, like Lagos State, go back to the pre-2018 situation. What's your perspective on this? Yeah,
that's the land use charge. The land use charge generated a huge debate in Lagos that period. I remember that we were at the State House of Assembly, and you could see the expression of all stakeholders. They were not happy about the land use charge at that time. The consultations, according to them, was not done properly. And they even had to ask the House of Assembly, why would you have passed such law at that time without even wider consultation? So it is a good development from the Lagos State government, identifying with the challenges of the time. And the interesting part of it is that 2017, 2018, and 2019 penalties have been waived, and estimating that, according to the Commissioner of Finance, Dr. Oluwo, he said that it was, Dr. Rabiolo said, that would cost Lagos 5.6 billion naira revenue. And if you look at IGR of many states, 5 billion naira alone is huge, because it's almost like over 25% of some states' revenues, not Lagos. Lagos is huge when it comes to IGRs every year. So that was a very significant step. And even the fact that the land use charge also takes away any charge on pensioners attaining 60 years, whether in public or private sector, which is showing the value created to pensioners too. So those are measures that are welcome developments in terms of how the Lagos State government is approaching issues. But on the other side, we saw that the Video Censor Board just issued a statement about taxation on video production and content, percentage around that and all that. I feel that those kind of things in this period, there should be consideration until when things return to normal and stable. Because if you look at across the world, Germany, United Arab Emirates, even in the UK, in the European Union, they are all looking at measures to get their small, medium enterprises back to strength. So they are not burdening them with fiscal measures. And that brings us to the stamp duties, even that was interpreted by the Federal Inland Revenue Service, where they said they're going to make collections massive and even had to broaden the scope to say 6% charge even on rent.
Yes,
I know people have been asking
exactly.
questions, but stakeholders in the financial market and the industry are saying that they need to come together, work together, because states are going to be very key in this area of the stamp duties collection. So they have to engage states, they have to ensure that it's not exploited against the citizens, because in this period, I believe that one of the most important fiscal measures we can take is government providing succor to the citizens, to the enterprises, until when things return to normal. You understand? The citizens are the ones that you get the tax from.
Yes.
I was even of the view that the value-added tax should have been reviewed, maybe from 7.5 back to 5%, the initial, but some people say, no, government needs revenue. Well, that said, we need to add additional burden on the citizens. We have to have looked at ways of supporting the citizens till when things return to normal. Because Nigeria, as you know, the economy is still recovering, still getting to that place of stability. Like I said earlier, unemployment is still high, 27.1%, but the power parity is still low. And then in this period, because of the economic challenges, a lot of companies are downsizing. Pay cuts are also there. So people are trying to really manage. And you know that we have a very extended family system here. There are people that, like, one person can be a support to like 30 people.
Exactly.
So it's really a critical period, and we expect governments, both at federal and state level, to explore ways they can support until things stabilize.
I must say, like you said, the 6% charge on rent came as a surprise, because people's personal finance, and people, I've had situations where some people can't even pay their rent at this time. They are actually looking for ways to. So I've even had situations of people returning back to the not so urban areas to settle down.
Yes, to things manage, because you like in South Africa had to talk to a association of landlords to hold on their rent. I think 2-3 months waiver. Exactly. I mean, when things are structured like that, governments, maybe I felt that maybe states like Lagos would have said, okay, landlords, just take it easy, hold meetings with them. But you know, those are things, those are areas that would have explored. But yeah, it's always good to hear from their own side the challenges they face. But I feel that there should have been wider measures of interventions that every citizen can feel and know that, okay, this period, this is the support we got. But we didn't get much of that period.
I'd like us to talk a little more, even on taxation. We have just in the news some days ago, there were situations of we hearing that some companies are actually moving their refineries and so to other states, Ogun State precisely. What's your view on this?
Well, Lagos and Ogun
Lagos
State,
is the hub of activities.
Lagos and Ogun State have a good interaction, particularly this administration of Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu and Prince Abiodun. I was privileged to be in a forum where they had this Lagos-Ogun conversation on partnership and development, and the moderator, who was distinguished Mr. Folusho Phillips, chairman of Nigeria South Africa Chamber of Commerce, engaged them. And I mean, in terms of the partnership, is very unique. Yes. Under the administration of Mr. Babajide Sanwo-Olu, Mr. Governor, Lagos State has been remitting what is due to Ogun State in terms of those who live in Ogun State and work in Lagos in the tax levels. There have been reconciliations. So in terms of that, I believe there is more of a cooperation between Lagos and Ogun. People will go to Ogun State because of economies of scale and maybe more beyond opportunities. It's just for Lagos State to also explore the reasons why and continue to work on competitiveness. I think we need to create more of industrial zones in Lagos where other people can invest. But Ogun has massive opportunities to be Lagos 2.0. So I think it should be looked at more of Lagos 2.0 than the competition between the Lagos and Ogun states. Because, for example, the rice, there's this rice production mill, and part of it, they're looking at Ogun State to support. The biggest waterworks in Lagos State is in Akute, and that's Ogun State. So there are areas that they can partner instead of finding themselves being on the competitive edge.
All right, now let's go into domestic commodity prices. We have seen an increase in quite a number of products. I mean, even down to noodles, Indomie noodles, where I think there's been an increase from about 2000 to even almost 2003, 2005.
That's the carton of noodles,
Exactly, and then even Gary, 50 kg of Gary, that was 12,000 before, it's now about 15,000.
That's huge.
I was surprised to find out that.
And Nigerians, we like Gary. Even if you have to sip or eat now with your soup, It's massive.
And then tomatoes, really, 50 kgs from 20,000, it moved to about 35,000 naira. How exactly do you think we can tackle this? Because really, this impacts, food is a livelihood, it's a major, and then it's impacting on people's personal finances.
Partially the challenges of the disruptions in supply chain and agro activities, COVID, logistics and all that. The price situation is showing, and even the rise in food inflation has been consistent this period. But for the citizens, again, that's where personal finance skills come in. We have to explore how you can manage this period. And I think it's time for families and Nigerians to cut, we always say this, cut your coat according to your size.
I think
so
now
50
kg
to
your
material. So 50 kg bag for tomato, that's 30,000.
From 20 to
that's huge. So to cook stew,
that's
that means
almost
you have to plan
increase.
very well in terms of cooking stew. I mean, foodstuffs are really using. I even saw that of loaf of bread.
Exactly.
That's 350 on the streets, and if you buy it at the supermarket, it's 400 naira.
Yes.
So that means
for
a bachelor, bachelors can really plan well in a bit, but family people are going through challenges this period. Households, so you don't get surprised. I mean, I've done a kind of personal survey and seen that many family men are on experiencing pressure. That's why you will not be surprised. Some of them have to reach and say, please, if you can loan me 20,000, I'll pay you back at the end of the month, because it's a challenging period for them.
And even that at the end of the month, some of the salaries have been, some are not
pay
even
cuts
getting
and all that.
salaries, like I heard from schools, some private schools.
Some schools have cut their salary by 40%. So, for example, someone is earning 50,000 naira, they cut it by 40%. Imagine if there's a lady that's a teacher there and she's like the support of the home. How would they cope? So it's really a challenging period, and all the measures that can be done in terms of addressing the logistics and the movement of foodstuffs this period is critical, so that you can really, to an extent, address. That is why I said, on the larger scale, fiscal policies that can reduce pressures on the citizens. This is when we require that. And again, you just wish that Nigeria had that system where at least families can get some benefits. So this is where we have to track all those interventions. Are people really feeling those interventions at the rural areas, as being said by the Ministry of Humanitarian Disaster Management? Are people really feeling it, as they say? Because if it's not, then definitely it has to be investigated, because whatever you can measure, you can't track, you can't evaluate it. So that's where it's very important. And that's why we have to demand for good governance, because in this period you expect that the government, the National Assembly, will also cut the size. It's not a time to hail a House of Reps member or a senator. If he's living excessively, we need to call them to order. Even the president, if their children are doing big elaborate on this parties, any minister also, you need to ask questions. These are taxpayers' money. I mean, people are going through challenges. We need to be accountable, and definitely we need a free democratic space to express that. Yeah, because, I mean, if everybody is cutting down, if companies are going through challenging times and have to do pay cuts, we must see that from the government too. Exactly. Governors, commissioners, local government chairmen. It's a time to adjust. Like Professor Paritomi would say, even if there was a way, they would have shut down one of the nationals, and maybe House of Reps also. House of Reps could just shut down for now until when things get back to that. I mean, there has to be cost-cutting measures across board.
I think we should also look at the slashing salaries.
Well, slashing salaries is one thing, but also the allowances. For this period, they're not traveling, so we need to you need to also cost the extra costs have been cut. So in terms of how they spend, there should have been some adjustments in the budget terms that goes more to supporting social intervention programs. That's why I'm saying that one key area we must look at, zoom on, is how the social intervention programs have functioned in this period of the COVID pandemic. Did they really reach those vulnerable people? What was the metrics? And then when people see transparency and there's trust in governance, people will manage and cope, even if someone has to sip gari or eat something, yam and oil. When he sees transparency in governance, he knows that there's hope. But when you are going through that and then you are seeing exorbitant expenditure, flamboyance in government officials and their families, people just feel very happy and sad about it.
All right. In wrapping up, because we have to go now.
Yes.
In terms of the removal of the fuel subsidy and the market-based electricity tariff regime, What are the implications for Nigerians?
The implications were in a dire strait because we now finally have to embrace a market-driven economy approach. And talking with one of the senior economists well known in the country, he was saying that, well, we have to embrace the pain. It's just like when you postpone your injection. Okay, so you have to take injection to heal of something. I just have to say, okay, do I postpone this injection or avoid it? So it's a necessary pain Nigerians have to go through, but the challenge again has been the decadence in governance, transparency and accountability. Because if there was that transparency and accountability, there was that issue of tackling corruption from governance down to every space. People would trust those measures for their good. So we face a challenge of gaining the trust of citizens. So when you're increasing the pump price and of course going market-based, moving the fuel subsidy, the impact on citizens, imagine if it gets the range now, 143, 145, and of course there are talks around the 150 price, it's going to have impact on transportation.
Sure, yes.
Some people already, if you track in Lagos, places that used to be like 200 or 300, people are paying 1,000 naira.
Exactly.
And they're earning 40,000 naira a month. So how are they going to cope? Again, when it gets to electricity, of course, we've seen activists saying that we will not accept it. Because part of it is the conditions that we got from the loans we've gotten from development financial institutions. So it's a challenge of how government can engage the citizens and explain to them why it is needed. But on the other hand, the accountability to ensure that there's funds in place to provide succor. Because we've done this subsidy attempt plan before. There was what we call Shopee. Shopee was supposed to help stabilize, but how it was managed was, I mean, the former chairman, the remarkable and well-known Dr. Christopher Kolade, I mean, said there was no accountability or transparency at the point. So these are the challenges we have in that regard. It's going to be a challenging phase for Nigerians. We hope that government can really engage and we can pass through that phase because it's going to be resisted. Okay, of course, you see Nigerian Labour Congress and various trade unions are already saying that they will resist any attempt to, at this point, raise more of the pump price and even the electricity tariff. Various groups say no, it will be. So how it is systematically done is important because, for example, some estates or industrial zones, there are various ways of approaching it. But I feel that those are innovations that can be done. Willing buyer, willing seller. So if you want to supply to big hotels, industries, and companies of highbrow areas or estates like the Banana Islands or so, they can afford that. But there has to be a measure for those who are at the rural areas, densely populated areas that they can afford. Because I know that electricity companies want to make money, but also there has to be a balance between that drive and services provided. And this time it's challenging for Nigerians because the purchasing power parity is down at the moment.
Thank you so much for joining us on the
Thank you very much, Taiwo.
It was great having you to discuss on the subject.
Nice, it was nice having you.
And that brings us to the end of today's edition of The Human Angle. You could send in your questions and comments to programs@proshareng.com and business@proshareng.com. Visit our website, www.proshareng.com, to get more information on your personal finance and updates from our news stories and videos. Also follow us on our social media platforms, showing on the screen for further updates on our market reports. Till I come your way again next week, thank you for watching and bye for now.